Hey everyone, this is Carmel Kemp, and today on Creating Life Consciously, I am thrilled to be speaking with Kendall Dixon. Kendall Anne Dixon is an accomplished author, storyteller, teacher, and healer who loves to help people tap into their inner knowing and power. She began her journey in the healing arts as a Shiatsu therapist, having graduated from the Shiatsu School of Canada in 1990. Her work as a Shiatsu therapist and subsequent business owner led her to work with some of the world's most famous people, including dignitaries, royalty, rock stars, and movie stars. Kendall began formally studying meditation in 1991 and has been teaching her current curriculum since 2005. She introduces her unique method of meditation, energy awareness, and spiritual tools in her new book, Finding Yes, the First Step. These tools help people increase their presence, happiness, and impact in the world. Kendall's mission is to help people harness their intuition and manage their own energy so they can manifest happier, healthier lives with power, purpose, and divine love. Amazing. First of all, Kendall, thank you so
Hi.
much for being here and joining us. It's a pleasure and a thrill. Um, I'm super excited. I wanna start off. We talk about your book, which also leads into a lot of what you do and what
Yeah.
Finding Yes is. Can you share that with us, please?
Yeah. Finding Yes, first of all, the title came from I was I was trying to write a book years ago, and I found myself having that experience that a lot of writers have. You sit at your desk and nothing happens. And so I made a pact with myself that I would write anything. It didn't matter. I could just write anything, but I had to write something. So one day I sat down, I was experiencing that block. And so I started to write, "It's so easy to quit." And I wrote a piece. And at the end of it, I realized that the title was Finding Yes. And that's an essay that I wrote that never made it into the book, but it's something that inspired and helped me find my own yes for writing the book. But the book's title, when it came to me, was, and I have found that intuition is a lot like this, where there's always deeper layers of meaning to things, because actually, when I first started studying with my spiritual teacher, whom I trained with for 9 years, one of the first really, really deep experiences that I had with her while I was meditating, I had this sense of, as I'm tapping into and experiencing being essence, I just felt this yes. It wasn't like, yes, you can do something. Yes, you have permission. It was just pure validation for being alive and for being here. And for myself at that time, that was huge because, I grew up being very aware that I was not a wanted child in my family. Unfortunately, my parents felt the need to tell me that on more than one occasion, but I also got lots of messages in other ways. And so in that moment, there was a lot of healing because I got this validation that, yeah, you belong. You're here. That means you belong. And that just came from this really deep yes. And then I guess I needed to hear the message again because a few years later, having been training with my teacher and starting my own teacher training program with her, I went through a period of a lot of self-doubt and started to experience a lot of that inner negative talk that I had experienced previously and thought I had totally healed. But, things come back up again and we come back around to them, but in different ways. And I had a dream. And in the dream, I was standing in a field with Jesus. And he said, "Kendall, you're alive. That's the biggest yes you're going to get." And in that moment, when he said that, my brain was flooded with all of these images of the world of, specifically, I remember a dandelion growing up in a crack in the sidewalk, like all this, just this whole flood of images, including a star being born. And what I realized in the dream, because, it's not something that necessarily could have happened as I was awake, but in the dream, I felt this tremendous assured message that everything, including a dandelion growing up in the crack in the sidewalk and a star being born, gets the same yes. And there isn't a bigger yes or a smaller yes. It's the same. And that was really mind-blowing for me. I came out of that dream. I woke up just being blown away that I had actually been searching for a big yes, and my inner being was saying, no, you're alive. That's your message. You have the same yes as everything else that has been created. So that's really where the title and where a lot of my my own purpose and mission come from, is tapping into that inner knowing so that we can each receive our own. Those were the messages that I needed to receive. But we each have our own journey and our own messages that we need to receive, and helping make a positive and open space for those messages to come in. So whether you need a dream or whether you need however your messages come, it's just, that's what informs my work. Now, how I actually teach that in the book, so my practice is really about practical tools. It's really about practicing very specific things to create a fertile ground for that awareness to evolve and come forth. I personally feel like we've talked around and about spirituality enough. There's millions of books, I'm sure, written on all the various things. Everything's been said in every way. I bet you've had the experience yourself of reading many of them. I know I have. I dedicated myself to reading, self-help and spiritual books for decades. But the one thing that I absolutely love about how I teach, the method that I use, is it's very pragmatic. And so I teach centering and grounding. That's the first step that, in my experience, is essential for all the other steps to occur. And I teach, my unique method is that I teach through contrast. So a lot of people will say to me, I need to be more centered. And I will ask the question, well, if you aren't centered, then where are you? And they never are able to answer that question. And I'm like, well, that is a question that needs to be answered. So I actually practice with centering. I practice the other more common forms of focusing, the ones that, we aren't really consciously aware of, yet we know we do them. Like getting in the analyzer, we focus in that intellectual aspect of ourselves, or we focus in that emotional aspect of who we are. That could be a default for someone, and just the consequences of it, but also just how to identify that so that when you practice the actual centering technique, you have a contrast, you have something to bounce it off of. Like, what does it mean to be centered? Well, what does it mean to not be centered? Let's have something, let's start defining, let's put some walls in this room and start giving ourselves some touchstones, some things to be aware of. So that's pretty much it. So in the book, I had a very strong message when I started writing the book to write it, to write an aspect of the book. I call it the curriculum, where as you read, you become more centered, rather than it being intellectual and that it's like you just read it and it's guiding you into these experiences and these states. And then I had started it actually in 2019, but I had my own business at the time, and I was, like a lot of people, had a hard time writing, getting time to write and to sit. And then, the next year, the pandemic happened. So that's when I actually got down to brass tacks and got it done. And in addition to the curriculum aspect, I wrote a bunch of essays that just kind of, one, cover a little bit of my own background with these tools and with my own journey. So I have the dream of Jesus in there. I have another one of him, I think, in there as well. And also I cover what I call learning space and possibility space, which are essential components to, in my experience, to making real change. If you want to transform, I mean, I hear a lot of people who will say, I went on a retreat, I went to, did a 1 week silent retreat, came back, felt great for 3 days, and then everything went back to where it was. And that, in my view, is because the really essential components of making change just weren't there in the retreat. They weren't all in one place for the person. So the book really represents the first lesson of my course that I've been teaching since 2005.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of things in there that I kind of want to focus on a bit. I don't know if you saw me kind of laugh a little bit when you talked about the dandelion growing out of the crack in the sidewalk. And this was something for me really early on, at the very sort of beginning of this journey for me, and shifting from the former iteration of the negative thought loop, darkness person, and as part of the process, and I totally agree that it has to be tools and techniques.
Yeah.
Because reading, talking, listening, they can plant seeds, they can be a motivation, but they're not going to shift anything within you unless you actually experience them for yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So my processes was always, I would come back to the breath, take the, some big deep breaths, center, and in that moment, you can realize that you get to focus your attention and your thought on anything that you want.
Exactly.
And for me, that's the relief. You don't have to focus on anything. The relief is just simply putting your attention on what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I actually wrote a piece, and I called it The Crack in the Universe. But it was a part of that process for me was that I found what we would call a weed. It's a plant, it's life, growing out of the crack in the sidewalk. And I thought, how magical is that?
Exactly. And I think that I've always noticed and felt that way whenever I've seen that. And that's why it showed up in the dream, because, my inner being knows, oh, Kendall really likes dandelions growing up in sidewalks, but it isn't something I was, if someone had asked me, I wouldn't consciously have said. But to your point, so I really see how we need some teachers who just woke up enlightened one day and they show us what's possible. But in my experience, the vast majority of us, it's going to be more like, a dimmer switch slowly increasing the light. It's not going to be a one-time awakening that you then just live. It's a process. And in that respect, then a method is really important and appropriate. And having a method to practice, I don't even think it matters which method, right? Like, it's just taking something and applying, as you say, applying your attention, learning that it's in applying our attention that's our life force. That's who we are. That's how we get to know who we are, wherever we're applying our attention. So it's that's very interesting that we have that in common, that crack in the sidewalk, which is really the universe. I love that.
Oh my God, this is just like how many other people have talked about it, a flower or a plant growing out of the crack in the sidewalk. But
I think we intuitively know how amazing it is because we think, okay, how did that happen?
What?
Yes.
Right? It's life is always going to seek going upwards, right? It's
Yeah.
just always going to try to find a way
Yeah.
to do that. And for sure, you know, the tools and the techniques and the attention and awareness. I mean, really, we are conscious awareness. This
Yeah.
isn't me. You know, this isn't me. It's mine.
Yeah.
Which is a really hard thing for some people's minds to grasp. And that's, you know, when
Mm-hmm.
we truly start seeking. Um, Anything can be um, doing the dishes can be
Mm-hmm.
saddening
Mm-hmm.
if you're, you know, your awareness and 100% there.
It's
Um,
actually one of my examples when I'm teaching non-resistance or transparency, because I teach through contrast. I actually get people to meditate in the beginning on a chore that has to be done that they don't like doing, so that they can get to know what resistance feels like for them and how they experience resistance. And then I guide them into releasing that. And the dishes, when I first started teaching in this way, came up a lot for people, you know, the looming dishes. And I think what's funniest about the dishes for me, and I had this realization one day, um, is I was meditating enough in the moment that I was aware of the thought that was causing the resistance. So I caught it. You know, oftentimes we just feel the resistance. We didn't catch the thought that created it. And it's always being created by thought. It's usually a thought like, I shouldn't have to do this. I don't want to do this, whatever. So the thought for me in that moment was, I shouldn't have to do this. And I thought, my answer to that was, well, you live alone. So who do you think's going to do it? And then I was able to go a little bit deeper and realize that the thought I shouldn't have to do it was initiated by a deeper thought of, oh, but I just did them this morning. And I was like, yeah, you ate again. This is how it works. You know, but to slow it down and realize that it's almost like those thought processes for me, that it reminded me of when I was 5 years old and I didn't want to make my bed because I was just going to sleep in it again. It's like, yeah, this is the world of the material world. We do things over and over, you know. It's
yeah,
really
watch,
funny.
rinse, and repeat,
Yes.
right?
But I was
Yeah.
able to drop that resistance very quickly when I could catch those thoughts, because I could answer them in real time in an embodied way. I could stand there in front of the dishes and say, yes, I'm doing them again because they're here. And it doesn't matter that I did them before. It's time to do them again.
Yeah. And then, you know, what I would do is that I would switch it from I need to do the dishes, I need to do the laundry, to I want to do the dishes so
Yeah.
that I have something to cook with for my later meal. I want to do the
Nice.
laundry because I want to, right? And
That's
a part
wonderful.
of,
I
you
love
know,
that.
right? It switch the
Yeah.
language because
Yeah.
we language can be so tricky. And we're
Yeah.
listening. The subconscious is a sponge.
Oh,
It
yes.
doesn't differentiate between what is real or imagined. And this is
Yeah.
largely how we created our own mystery,
I know.
right? Is
Yeah.
to then go, okay, I can consciously just become aware what's running here, because this is just a
Yeah.
heap of memory.
Yeah.
And it's the old software
Yeah.
is so
And it can
the
be
the
rewritten. It can be, that's the important
absolutely
part. It can be rewritten.
right the software.
Yeah.
And for me, there's a big difference between mental activity,
Mm-hmm.
which is caused by the subconscious and the memory that's going to constantly be running like the popcorn machine or the bingo ball thing,
Yeah.
and conscious focused attention.
Mm-hmm.
So where can I just be aware of the mental activity and leave it alone?
Yeah.
Don't engage with it, don't
Yeah.
judge it, just let it run. And the more you let it run, the greater distance you can get from it. And then you can have a greater opportunity to focus your attention and focus thought, which
Yes.
is what you can be
Is the presence. That's the
in the
essence.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow, that's really
yeah,
great. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
yeah. There's so many layers,
I know. I
And
love the layers. Let me share with you a really fun happenstance. Okay. So last year, I was having trouble, and I still am. It's still something that I'm working on, promoting the book, promoting myself. I have taught in the last 10, 12 years, mostly one-to-one over Zoom. I taught a lot of groups prior to that. But, I think a lot of spiritual people have a hard time distinguishing, the service component of offering what they have to offer and the more traditional salesy stuff that's out there, right? So last year, I was watching that Shark Tank show because I love watching that show. I think it's really fun. And afterwards, I prayed while I was going to sleep. I said, God, just give me a good idea, something that's in alignment with who I am, that is fun and easy. Now I'm going to say, okay, God, you got 2 out of 3, not bad. It hasn't been easy, but maybe my definition of easy is off. But anyway, the idea that came to me after was just a word. The next couple of days, this word encouragements, MINTS, came into my mind. And I went on this long journey down a rabbit hole, figuring out whether it was possible or not to print encouraging phrases on candy. And I'm at the point now where I'm launching my encouragements. I found the printer, I went, the edible ink, I've got it all set up. And it hasn't been easy, and it has been fun. And it is so in alignment with who I am that I actually missed how in alignment it was. So I had a client the other day who said, well, why don't you sell your books at the market where you're selling the candy? They're finding yes, encouragements. She said, those are, really, those go well together. And I thought, oh my God, like it never occurred to me. And then when I was making a bunch of the candies I was printing the other day, which sounds really weird. So here I am printing all these candies, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to try and do a double printing on the main image. So the main image is my encouragement hero. It's a corgi in a superhero suit. And I wanted to turn it over, and I wanted to just put the word yes in a heart on the back. Well, it was really difficult to do. And at one point, I said to myself, well, I'm not going to do too many of these. And I immediately had an answer from my inner being that said, you don't have to. You could put one yes in every bottle and let people find their own. And I was like, oh my God, like my book's called Finding Yes. And I'm going to have like one candy in a bottle, or at 1 or 2 that has a yes on it. I'm just blown away by the layers. I did not create that. That's like how it happens. That's how it unfolds. And it's just the magic of it, isn't it?
it's brilliant because it's like where's Waldo?
Yes,
Like,
yes. You've got to like that game. Yeah.
Waldo. Oh God, I got to find yes. There's a yes in this bottle somewhere. That was my
Yeah.
encouragement.
My
So we don't
encouragement.
have to be jury to find it, and it becomes playful, which is, I think, really important as well.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
so
And
many ways of order.
I asked for something that was fun on purpose because I had found myself going into a bit of efforting around the book and the online course. And I know for myself, that's one of my cues. I'm not centered. When I'm centered, everything flows, like finding that that new marketing technique or whatever it is with the yes. It just happens. But when things aren't flowing and they aren't just happening, it's usually because I'm in effort or I'm doing something. And so what my go-to is just to kind of slow things down, back off. So that's why I asked for something that was fun. It's like, let's have some fun. Forget about trying to sell the book and just allow things to unfold.
Well, 100%. And it was interesting. I was talking with a friend yesterday about, the balance between the masculine and the feminine energies, which are not at all male or female, women or men. But being in that place of receptivity is,
Mm,
you can't grasp it, right? And
yeah,
when we're in that place of receptivity and playfulness, we have to woo the divine. The
yeah,
divine isn't lost. We're the
yeah,
ones that, it's like we have to wait to be found. So how do we
yeah,
get to be found? Well, shine as bright as you can, play
yes.
and dance and sing and trust, which is
Oh,
beautiful,
you
beautiful,
know,
right? So
you're you are speaking so much to the heart of me when you say that. I have been a storyteller for many decades, and I did a show called Shake the Corn: 6 Stories of Serendipity. And I ended it with this very short story, which is when I was a little kid, I lived in the country. And when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I was playing hide and seek with all of the other kids in the village because we all played together. There wasn't like, you're this age, we're this age, but there was only like 15 of us or something. So, we obviously had to play it all together. And we were playing in the corn, which we were not allowed to do, but we did anyway. And for those of you who don't know, like corns are plowed in circles in the center, and then oftentimes the fields meet like highways and other like the woods or whatever. So anyway, I thought I was doing great because no one could find me. And then I got really scared because I realized no one can find me. And I felt really lost. And I just have this memory of the fear of how, because it was late August or what, late in the season. So the corn was much bigger than me at that point. And this, all of a sudden, one of the bigger kids yelled, "Shake the corn, shake the corn." And I grabbed one of the stalks and with all of my might started shaking it. And all of a sudden, kids start jumping through the corn from all angles, all around me, laughing and screaming because everyone's excited that they finally found me. And I have never lost that feeling of being found. That is such an exciting feeling. And to your point, what you were just saying about like, we have to shine our light bright, we have to shake the corn, we have to do something to say to the universe, hey, I want this, I need this, help me out here. And then we have to, as you say, be receptive to receiving it. But that feeling of being found, you know, how we often say, I wouldn't wish this on anyone? This is one of those things I'd wish on everyone. I'd wish on all of you. And for me, whenever I've had one of those really serendipitous moments, that's exactly how I feel. I feel found. I feel seen. I'm like, oh, okay, the universe is listening. The inner being is present, you know?
I love that. I love that. I mean, I'm surrounded by corn. I live in the Sacred Valley in Peru, and
Oh,
it's
oh,
harvest time for us. It's spring in North
wow.
America, but it's harvest here. So the corn's
Wow.
been growing for months, and it's just it's everywhere, and it's and so shaking the corn, and it's
You get it.
also traditionally also one of the three sisters of abundance in Native American culture, and obviously here. I mean, it's the valley is just it's corn. It's what
Wow.
we call maize, chocolate, and so it's you could get lost in some of these cornfields for sure. But that feeling of being found is in those moments of realizing that we're it's going to be a divine paradox because we come into this world alone and we're going to leave it alone.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, we're never really alone. And like, well, what does that really mean? There is
Yeah.
no separation. It's
Mm-hmm.
about, being found and understanding that there's only one and we're a part of it all,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's where we get lost is, in the mental body, in the
Yeah,
thinking
and
that this
in
is
in the
me.
individualization of who we are,
Yeah,
like, and we need
yeah,
that individualization for our experience, for our journey, for our learning. But we can get lost. It can take us away a little bit from that experience of the oneness. So, yeah.
100%, because as soon as you think that this is me and I'm separate from anybody else,
Mm-hmm.
then we start to get tangled. Because
Yeah.
if I will almost go, I will try as hard as I can to go out of my way to not to refer to this as me. It's
Right.
myself, it's my human, it's my mind, but it can never be me or who or what
Yeah.
I truly am.
Yeah. I just
Because
want to
if I say this
mention,
is me,
yeah, I just want to mention I'm feeling that really deeply. I'm taking this away from this podcast, that practice, because that's a step I haven't integrated. Um, because every time you talk about it, I'm feeling a lot of feelings that are familiar to me in my gut and in my heart that let me know that this will be helpful. This is going to be useful for me, to not ever refer to the body as who I am, but just always to remind myself that it's something I have, it's something I inhabit, and I use, and I'm very grateful for. It is absolutely a gift. It lets me have the moment, but it isn't me. And I'm really taking that in deeply, because the way you phrase it is, there's something in that that's new for me. And I love that. That's what I love about these conversations is, there are times when I recognize I'm ready to hear something in a new way or in a deeper way. And someone will just say something like that, and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, that's hitting. That's it."
yeah, well, if I think that this is me, then I'm going to become attached to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, I mean, and it's not about living life detached, it's about living life fully engaged and fully involved. But if I
Yes.
think that this is me,
Yeah.
then death is going to be fearful, right?
Very.
But if it's mine, right,
Yeah.
it's mine. What we gather can be ours, but it can never be us. And so, it's like, this is mine.
Yeah.
Am I taking this with me when I die? No. I'm not taking anything with me. And it's not about, you see, I don't look at dying as death. There's only life and life and life and life and different dimensions of life. And this is a physical form of life. And then there's other finer, more subtle forms of that life. We don't own anything. We're borrowing everything, including this body.
Yeah, we're we're caretakers, in my view, of whatever we're using, and meant to be caretakers to leave it for the next person. When you were talking about life and life and life, it reminded me of, in my late 30s, my father passed away, and I had a very, very complex relationship with him. He was a professional deep trance psychic. I didn't grow up with him. I moved to live with him later as a teenager. And there are many things that I received from him as gifts, but there were some hard learnings as well. One of them was he was ardently against having children and didn't want me in his life. So I was quite an interloper in his life. Um, but when he died, I had like a lot of confusion and a lot of the grief. And I remember going into Stanley Park with the intent to find death so that I could learn from it. I wanted to learn, like, how does nature handle death? Maybe there's something here for me. And try as hard as I couldn't really find death. I could only find more life. As you can imagine, trees that have fallen, there's now all kinds of life teeming all over it. And one of the things that I got from it, which again goes back to how I learn really well from contrast, which is one of the reasons it's part of my method. Because as I was walking through the park, I was thinking, okay, wait a minute. I know there's millions of birds and insects, and there's thousands of animals, but you very rarely see any of their carcasses. You once in a while, but it's not really a common sight. In fact, finding old bones is a treasure, and people keep them for that reason. And as I'm walking through the park, I'm seeing all of the old, the trees, the logs that have all this growth on them. And that's when I really got that message that there's no real death. It's just a continuation of life in another way. And as you were speaking too about like not getting attached to this so that you can, just leave it when necessary, when you're ready to do that. It reminded me of John Lennon's quote about how someone asked him what he thought of death. He said, "I think it'll be like stepping out of one car and into another." And I thought, I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, it was something like that.
Yeah. Who was it that said, I think it might have been Ram Dass, that, exiting this is like sort of slipping out of a tight shoe.
Well,
I had a couple of interesting experiences that we don't have time for.
Yeah. One of my experiences with the tight shoe is, so a lot of my intuitive stuff comes in my dream time, my dreamscape. And that's been since I was a child. I had a lot of premonitions and those kind of things. But so when I was doing deep in the work with my teacher, I had a night where I went to sleep and I didn't realize I was dreaming. It was a lucid dream. And I thought I was just going to sleep. But then I took my hand and I put it straight through my chest, deep into the heart chakra, and I unclicked something and I pulled it off, and it was a cloak, and I laid it on a chair beside my bed. And that's when I realized I must be dreaming, because I knew that chair no longer existed. And I had this sense of, oh, it feels so good. And I looked at the cloak and it had my earthly name on it, Kendall. And it was all different patches of different colors. And I absolutely loved it. I looked on it absolutely lovingly. But I also had the feeling of, but it's quite a snug fit. I've just got to remove that let's take that off. Let's remove the identity for the dream time, because it's very snug.
Right. And an intellect will fiercely defend the identity.
Oh, yeah.
Fiercely defend the identity. Right. And the intellect can never know anything. It just cuts things apart. It's the yeah, but what if, and the thing that runs you around in circles over and over and over and over.
So my first really big experience with that, with my former teacher, and it's in my book, this story is in my book. Because I had spent all those years with my father, who actually taught meditation. So I started meditating at around 14, and I trained in pranayama, in Iyengar yoga, and did Siddha yoga, and had all these things, let's say, under my belt, as it were. But I became very, very sick in my early 30s. And I had been meditating for, more than a decade at that time. And I went to my I went to my doctor, and she said, well, this really is a stress-induced illness. Why don't you try meditating? And I was like, but I've been meditating for over a decade, So I really felt like meditation was not the answer, based on the fact that I had still managed to develop this stress-induced illness. Flash forward to getting an invite to a friend's energy awareness class. And I knew right away that this was for me. I signed up. And about 3 classes in, I'm sitting there. Our teacher instructs us to close our eyes. And instead of going through the meditation she was guiding us through, I have a memory. And in this memory, I remember lying about what my favorite color is. And I remembered why I lied, because I wanted my sister to like me. And I just said that I said green because she said green. And when I came out of the meditation, because I was still, even though I'd done all that meditation, I was still very much in the mental language as a person. And so it was this enormous shock to me to realize that my favorite color is something other than green. Now, I'm not suggesting as adults we have favorite colors, but you were mentioning how the egoic mind and the intellectual mind wants to know everything. this was like really clear to me. It was really important to me. And it was something I didn't know about myself. And so it actually rocked it was like an invisible hand had reached into the house of cards that was my identity and just said, oh, we're just going to take this one out because we know this one is what all the others are based on. And it changed that. Just all of a sudden I became open to receiving because I realized there are things I don't know about myself. What might I learn in this class? So I went into the class with a lot of resistance, not realizing it. I was unaware of the resistance, but I went in because I thought, oh, I have all this knowledge. I've done all this meditation. I've read all these books, right? I was armed. I was literally armed with knowledge. And my inner being said, well, let's just take this one card out and see what happens. There's more to that story, but it's in the book. But I love that. I actually love that aspect of the egoic mind now because it's so predictable. I can count on the egoic mind always thinking it knows everything.
Yeah, you can see it sneaking around and like,
yes.
Okay.
Coming in the back door all the time. Yeah.
Been there, done that. Sorry, I'm not going to cave this time, right? It's just
yeah.
The processes and the tools. I mean, I'm not sure if there's. I don't know who said Guru is.
I don't. Yeah. Okay.
5 years ago, he is an enlightened being, master mystic yogi, walking the planet right now.
Yeah.
And real deal.
Yeah.
So I do about 4 hours of sadhana a day. I'm up at 5. I get most of it done by 8. And then I have in the meditation thing, and I think that there's a lot of misconception because even before this, I was like, I can't meditate. This is
yeah.
The thing is that, and what he would say is that meditation isn't something that you do, but you can become meditative.
Yes. Yeah, very much right? So.
And so there's a little bit of a difference about what's happening during the processes, and I do, other things. Some of it involves mantra, ancient Sanskrit mantra, which is something we could also refer to as an invocation to use and work with as a tool to not only ground and center, but to refine the energy that is contained within this being that is heavy and gross and dense, which is for me also very comparable to what we would refer to as Ikaro in shamanism, when we invoke and ask ayahuasca or San Pedro to come into the ceremony and help. And they're very much aligned for me. And, for me, they're sort of parallel. They're the same well, even though they would seem incredibly different. There's so many similarities between working with those tools to support and enhance a refinement of energy that can bring you more into being in that state of being grounded and centered and receptive more often than not over time. It's a big distance from the memory that this is in the intellect and the identity and the I want, I need, I should is all crap.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's largely related to thinking that this is me. And then where does this seek comfort?
And so for me, the divine paradox is that, for example, when I started training with my teacher right from the beginning, I realized that I had actually not been meditating. What I'd been doing is disconnecting. So I could go into what I thought was a meditative state for hours, and then I would go to work and I would have all the same emotional stress and whatnot, as if the meditation had never happened. And I never put those things together. it's because the meditation hadn't happened. Because what I did is I disconnected and I used it the same way people use alcohol or over exercising or sex or any of the other addictions or the other things that can become addictions. I used it to disconnect, like even excessive TV watching. People are zoning out. That's not relaxing. People think that's relaxing because they're just not feeling their body, but that's actually really stressful for the body to sit for long periods of time. And that scientific information is now coming out into the world, how, sitting's the new smoking, they say, in terms of the negative effect for the body. But in my case, when I started practicing with my teacher, and I realized that this is rather unusual. Most people don't have such a dramatic experience. But for me, I would arrive to the class feeling fine, and then we would start our practice, and I would have incredible, intense back pain, and it would just show up. And I would literally I spent about the first 2 years studying with my teacher, leaning forward with my arms on my legs because I was in so much physical pain every time we practiced. And when I had that experience and I spoke with my teacher about it, she said that for her, what she was seeing for me, because I'd done Shiatsu for so many years, I used all those abilities to disconnect, to override all of the impulses and all of the natural things and really the messages of the body. I was doing too much and I had hurt my back, and I just worked through it because I was a master of disconnection. I wasn't learning to inhabit and be present. And so for me, the divine paradox is, okay, the body's not real. It's in my mind, in a sense. I'm creating it. I'm creating it so that I can have this experience in this 3D world. And yet, the solution to experiencing myself as a spiritual being is in the body, ironically. It's about becoming more, excuse me, more inhabited and being more aware and present. And I find that like to be a kind of a paradox. And it's something that I work on now. Like all of my practices, every meditation starts with being aware of being more inside the body. I start there all the time.
Well, the only way out is in.
Yeah.
And, through the divine paradox, and I know that we say that, there's nothing out there. But the reality is that this is an organism. It is a living organism, and we are manifesting it and creating it. But it is still really, looking for existentialism is the mind is never going to know.
Yeah.
Right? There's so much that we can never know. But learning how to use this as a tool, which is why I do the sadhana, and also why I work shamanically with plant medicine. And one of the things with my guru is learning how to sit properly, because the spine is actually incredibly important. It's really actually representative of the axis of the earth. And so if you can sit properly, in the first place to start would be an Arjuna Siddhasana, right, which is the easiest position. Is that when, like the old TV sets with the antenna on the roof?
Yeah.
And Dad would have to go out and,
Yeah.
So if you can actually adjust this, it becomes a receiver.
Yeah.
And then the body becomes no longer an issue. And it does take time to be able to.
I love that. I've never,
for Westerners.
I've never heard that in that way. As you were talking, it made me wanted to adjust how I was sitting. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I just suddenly had this like, oh, I want to sit a little bit more here, and just being in the moment with, as you were speaking, I really got that impression of the receptive mode of like the antenna of the spine, and how, it is this, you think about all the neurological of the core of the spine. I've never put it together that way. Thank you for that. That's a new piece for me.
Here that is a receiver, and if you Arjuna Siddhasana is that you want to take your left heel and
Mm-hmm.
bring it in so that it is in front of, but not quite, you're not sitting on it, but on the
Mm-hmm.
perineum,
Mm.
right? And then your right foot over that, and then your spine is up, and then you can sit, yoga mudra or just with hands open, and practice that. Um, start with where you're comfortable and push it a little, and the body will complain, and then you ease off and go further and further. And
What do you
this is
recommend
very
for
difficult in the beginning.
Yeah, what do you recommend for people who have, like, I have 3 bulging discs in my lower back. So there's quite a lot of
Squats,
structural
squats.
squats.
It's going to be seem counterintuitive for you, but you can start with 7. Seven's always a good number to start with,
Okay.
and you're just your feet shoulder width apart, and
Mm-hmm.
then you just squat 7 times. So what that does is it will start to elongate the spine,
Ah, nice.
and so you're not going to be pressing on those discs as much. Um, Also, and if it's yoga namaskar is also a process which will elongate the spine and will prevent shrinkage. People that are elderly will, I used to be 5'8", now I'm 5'5".
Yeah.
So what it does is it strengthens the spine, which is the main receiver. And so what I'll do is that I'll maybe even put some links or whatnot in the show notes when this podcast gets published for
Wonderful.
squats, because
Yeah.
that will help your spine.
Mm.
Yeah. And then to sit with Ardha Siddhasana for, if it's 10 minutes at first, then do 10 minutes.
Mm.
And then you can go from there. See, this is the tricky thing. Pain is helpful and it tells us things. Knowing when to push through that pain. Okay, I'm in this pain. I have, the bulging disc or whatever. Can I damage myself further by doing something?
Yeah.
If the
That's always the
answer is
question.
yes, then
Yeah.
don't do it. If the
Mm-hmm.
answer is no, and it's pain and discomfort,
Mm-hmm.
then the question is how much can I push through, because it will also help in the long
Mm-hmm.
run. But I'm not suggesting by any means that you sit for 2.5 to 3 hours. I can sit for about 2.5 hours
Wow. Yeah.
in that position.
As a shiatsu therapist, for over 30 years, I mean, I have just worked with so many people with what I call good pain.
Mm-hmm.
And there really is such a thing as good
Yeah.
pain. There's pain that's actually healing and helpful. And then there is the pain that isn't helpful, which is what you were just
Mm-hmm.
describing as well. And to just, like, as you say, be able to come to that line and assess, like, when I was younger, when I was doing yoga, I have scoliosis. That's actually what caused the bulging disc. It isn't
Right.
caused by my work. I had that spine when I started, and I remember my teacher taking me aside, my shiatsu teacher taking me aside and saying, "I'm not sure this is the right career for you with this
Mm-hmm.
back. I don't recommend it."
Right.
And I'm really glad I didn't listen to him, because I went, and I've done shiatsu way longer than anyone else in my class that year. So it was absolutely the right thing for me. But there has been, like, my whole life around that, you know, as I've said to many people over the years that I've been working with my course, pain is the most consistent teacher you will ever have. It's one of those things that it's so consistent, it is so persistent when you have it, that it will bring you into whatever you need to look at, whatever you need to do. And I wouldn't necessarily wish it on anyone. I have what they call EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic um, condition where my collagen doesn't form as strongly as other people's. And so it's given me lots of opportunity to experience that. But there's so much I mean, I'm intimately familiar with all the different types of pain. And so when I have a client, all I have to do is ask them to describe it. And um, there's this one exercise that I do to help alleviate some nerve problems that I have in my arm. And the only way I can describe it is exquisite pain. It is exquisite. And I know that even though it's like a 12 on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of experience, but it's exquisite. And I know it is so helpful in healing. And just to be able to get to know those edges with the pain, and yeah, it's a whole, it's a whole journey on its own.
It is, and everything's always coming back to awareness and being the observer, and where
Yeah,
we have to strive in so many ways. I mean,
yeah,
especially spiritual seekers. It's a striving. It's a
yeah,
trust. It's just a surrender in many ways, and so it's about also being aware of it, being discerning with intelligence, not the intellect, which are two completely different things, and
yeah,
determining, okay, where do I need to push, and I pushed and pushed, right? I know sometimes my hip will burn when I'm sitting, but I also know that I'm not hurting it anymore. So I
yeah,
will just sit there and I will be like, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind,
yeah.
and focus on something else.
So one of
So
the process,
there's so many layers.
yeah, one of the processes that I use is like inquiry. I love to ask questions. So one, I don't find myself that why questions are very helpful. But if, for example, I have pain, I would ask the question, who is the I that feels the pain? That would be my question. Who is the I that feel? And as I ask that more and more, I find that I just become aware of being. And another experience that I had, it, for reasons which we don't have time to go into here, I think it's in the stories in my book. I've had a lot of dreams with Jesus in them, and they're always really potent for me in terms of a learning, and they're always very simple. And this one, I was in a lot of pain, and I had pain. It just felt like all over. But I had a dream of him where he asked me to be aware of being in all the aspects of myself where there wasn't pain. And I realized that the pain was actually just focused in one leg, and really just in one uh, tendon, one ligament in the hip and in the pelvis. And so I learned to live from the parts of myself that were not experiencing pain rather than getting hyper focused. And that's one of the centering things. We can get other centered on things, and then
Mm-hmm.
it becomes the only thing we're aware of. And so I was obviously other centered on the pain, hyper focused on it. Now, we could do this with a thought, we can do this with a so-called problem in our life, but here's the thing, there's no creative force in that hyper focused other centering. So we can't actually come up with a solution or evolve it. The key is to step back, get a wider gaze, so that we can engage with the wholeness of who we are as a being. And to your point, when you're saying, like, if you're sitting there and you're feeling pain, you're asking, you're not hurting it more. The way I say that is I'm connecting with my higher self, my inner being. And I'm always asking now to be guided. So because I have EDS, it's not, or this form has EDS, it's not, I can't argue with that reality. But what I can do is I can ask my inner being to show me, and I will just center and ask, teach me, guide me, show me, how can I do this movement in a way that's perfect for me right now, that's healing for me right now. And it's amazing to me how that changes everything.
I
asking
love
that
that.
question. And even for my shiatsu, I mentioned how I had been hurting myself for years. Well, actually, it was Ram Dass's, he has a quote that says something about if your compassion doesn't if your circle of compassion doesn't include yourself, it's incomplete. And I remember hearing that one day in a new way, because I have always prayed for every student client that I work with. And I've done thousands and thousands of massages, thousands. Okay. I did 8 a day for, 10 years, and then at least 1,000 a year for the next 10 years. So, and every single one of those massages, I always began by praying for the person, and that I might be able to provide a massage that was helpful and healing and for them. And I realized I never included myself in any of those prayers. And so when I started getting to the point where I was unable to do massage because of these back issues, I started, luckily they say when the student's ready, the teacher appears. Ram Dass's quote, came through the ether at me, and I went, oh. So the next time I went to do a massage, happened to be, I was working at a hotel, and so you don't get to pick your clients. And he was a huge guy. And I thought, oh, geez. And I just closed my eyes and I said, help me, teach me, guide me, show me how I can give a massage that is helpful and healing for both of us. And I had no pain after the massage, and we both had an incredible experience. And I mean, that changed my life, just being able to ask, just to pray for both of us.
And that's absolutely beautiful. And I think it's a wonderful place to sort of for today.
Nice.
We could go
We
into
could go.
that, but the healing and the work we do is not just for the person that might be immediately in front of us,
No.
the well-being. And that's just something that the medicine continues to teach me. And everything is always in the reciprocity of facility. Prayer, show,
Mm.
prayers and blessings for all,
Yeah.
all humanity, all plants, all animals, all rivers, all lakes, all streams. So Kendall, I want to thank you immensely. This is like, that is an hour that is just like, oh,
Woo!
gone by incredibly quickly. Thank you so much for being here, and everybody out there, thank you for listening to Creating Life Consciously. Please like, share, comment. If you didn't like, it's okay. And we will see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you.